Hey guys, it's Kylie. Today I'm actually going to be talking about my 2018 least favorite and most favorite books. I've went through all the books that I read and most of them were pretty positive because I'm pretty good about DNFing books that I don't like, but I ranked each category 1 through 5, so let's get right through it. First, I'm going to start with my best books of 2018. So coming in at number 5, I have Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is kind of a utopian society where they have conquered death. No one dies except for by the hands of a scythe. And a scythe, they perform what is called gleaning in order to control the population. And this story follows 2 teens who have become scythe apprentices. You guys, I can't even talk enough about this series. This goes number 5 as well for Thunderhead, the sequel. But this, oh my god, it is such a ride. I can't even talk enough about it. It's just so fun and exciting and just, hold on, my camera might need just a little bit. You guys, this book is such a ride. It's so interesting, and it brings up a lot of questions about death and when a person should die, what makes them worthy of dying, all of that fun jazz. So if you have not picked this up yet, I highly recommend that you do. Coming in at number 4 on my favorite books of 2018 is On Writing by Stephen King. This is dirty, first and foremost, but secondly, this book, I want to frame this in a shadow box and put it on my wall. If you are at all interested in writing whatsoever, I highly recommend that you pick this up. You know, even if you don't like Stephen King, he's doing something right. So I think he has a lot to offer. This is actually half memoir of himself and of the craft. It's not completed, for the parts about his life, it's not completed. It's just snippets of his life that pertain to him becoming a writer. I found it very interesting, and if you're a Stephen King fan, this is one you should pick up because it does have a lot to offer about Stephen King himself, but if you're a writer, it offers a lot in regards to writing as well. So, of course, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I want to hang it on my wall. It's great. Coming in at number 3 is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn, and actually this was one of the first books I read in 2018. I listened to it on Audible and I was absolutely blown away. This is kind of my introduction to, would it be considered a domestic thriller? Thrillers in general. This follows a woman who suffers from agoraphobia. She doesn't leave her house, and throughout the story you're learning that she has experienced a trauma that is kind of affecting her and her ability to leave the house. While she's in her house, she peeps on her neighbors with binoculars and a camera, and she watches them. One day, a new neighbor moves in, and there's something odd about that neighbor, and while she's dealing with this trauma and the ability to leave her house, she's also trying to piece together what this strange thing is that's happening with these neighbors. I was completely blown away by this story, as I've said. The narrator was fantastic. I adored just everything about it. If you haven't read it, again, I recommend it, as with everything on this list. Coming in at number 2 on the list is Educated by Tara Westover. I was actually loaned a copy of Educated by my grandmother-in-law, my husband's grandma. I didn't actually read the physical copy because it was on Scribd and I wanted to return it as soon as possible to her, but I'm glad I did because I discovered one of my favorite narrators by doing so. Her name is Julia Whalen, and I absolutely adore her narration voice. But this is a memoir about Tara Westover and her life growing up without just your standard education. She was raised by a family who is very devout in their religion and a father who just doesn't really trust the government, you know, all of that conspiracy type stuff. So she's had an interesting childhood. She actually ended up going to, I forget a big college. I forget which college it is. I'll look it up and put it on the screen. But she ended up going there and getting a very she ended up going there and getting one of the best educations that you can get. And it's just, you guys, it's so fascinating. Coming from somebody who did go to public schools and I did get a standard education, it was very interesting to me just to read this perspective and understand kind of just a new side of life. And finally, we're on number 1. This was hands down my favorite read of the year, and that was Illuminate by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This goes for the whole trilogy, but I'm just going to talk about the first one. I have a hard time explaining this. This is a sci-fi told in file format. So it has like emails, chat transcripts, drawings, excerpts of journals, posters, all of it. It's great. So this is pretty much about a space war. A company called Bitech, I believe that's how you pronounce it, is kind of trying to wipe out a planet, and there's like, oh my gosh, I can't even explain it all. Like, I just know that it's fantastic and I plan to get a tattoo based on it one day. It's just so great. I can't say this highly enough. If you've been on my channel at all, you know that I just am in love with this series. I'm actually planning to reread it soon, but like, seriously, this is like a work of art. Like, look at this page right here, look at it. It's just, it's a work of art with words in a way that I haven't seen before. So if you haven't read this and you're into sci-fi, or you want kind of like a YA step into sci-fi that's fun and interesting, I definitely recommend this series enough. The second one is called Gemina and the third one is Obsidio, and whew, my goodness. Alright, jumping into my least favorite books of 2018, and this is the part that everybody likes to watch. So the first 2 I have physical copies of, but the last 3 I don't. So I'm going to start with number 5, of course, and that would be Unburied Carol by Josh Malerman. This, you know, it wasn't bad. Like I said, I had read a lot of really good books this last year, and I was pretty good about DNFing what I didn't like, so a lot of these are not bad per se, but they were pretty disappointing. My biggest problem I had with this book is it lacked a lot of subplot. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but like, there was the main storyline, and then there was nothing really else. The characters didn't really flesh out very well. It was a lot of internal monologuing, and I'll tell you why in a second. And that's because this book follows a woman named Carol who suffers from a condition where she occasionally falls into a coma-like state. People think that she could easily mistake her as dead, but she's not. She's just kind of in a coma. And one day, her dearest husband decides that the next time she falls into this coma, she's going to be buried alive. He's going to play it off like she died, and he's going to take the fortune that she had from her family. Word reaches out to her ex, who is an outlaw, and this whole story is about unburying Carol. So that's it. I feel like it's really hard to talk about this book without spoiling anything because it lacks so much plot. It wasn't bad, it just lacked a lot and it didn't hook me in as much as I wanted it to. Alright, so coming in at number 4 would be Dr. Sleep by Stephen King. I don't know where my cover went, but Dr. Sleep. This is the sequel to The Shining, also by Stephen King, which is my favorite book, and I was just really disappointed in this one. Not to say that it was bad, like everything on this list, but it didn't hook me as well as The Shining. I feel like this book was really forced. I don't feel like there was supposed to be a sequel, but Stephen King wrote one anyways. I still love The Shining, but the second book, the sequel, didn't really do it for me. And this book is about Danny Torrance as he is an adult dealing with the trauma from all of the events that happened in The Shining, as well as some substance abuse. Some stuff happens, he meets some people. It's not that memorable. like The Shining was. So I'm sorry I can't really say much, but I don't really remember it. I just know it was kind of forgettable. It felt really forced and it just didn't do it for me. And coming in at number 3 is actually Deep Cosmos by Project Kyle. I would like to preface this one by saying that I have spoken to the author like in private messages, and I'm so grateful for him to send me an ARC of this book. This was back in October, and he seems like a very sweet person, and him and his book, well, not him, but his book being on this list in no way means that it's not a reflection on him, it's just about the book. This is a self-published book, it is a sci-fi, and my biggest problem with it was I felt like it wasn't ready to be published. It really needed a professional editor, if there was one. I'm not quite sure, but it needed more of it. It needed more drafts. The characters were not developed, and the plot almost moved too quickly. This book isn't bad, but it wasn't my favorite, and it kind of bored me a little bit. So moving on to number 2, my second least favorite book of the entire year is actually Artemis by Andy Weir. This is like a space heist novel. It's about this girl who lives in a colony on the moon, and she gets tangled up into some of this illegal activity and is put in the position where she has to pull off a heist. I think I remember, number 1, it was boring. It wasn't very fun to listen to. I listened to it on audio. It wasn't very fun to listen to, but also the main character, she was also kind of like a caricature. She talked so brutally, and it was just, and again, it's not like I have an issue with like brute female characters or anything like that, but it didn't feel right. It felt really forced and off, and like, just, it wasn't right. I had no interest in this book, and that's kind of the case with a lot of these, just because I did so well with DNFing books. A lot of these are kind of boring. I feel like I'm having a hard time like describing these books just because they're all kind of the same reason, but it didn't captivate me at all, and it was a bland book. And finally, number 1 least favorite book of the year definitely has to be The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I read this for my book club back in August, and this kind of follows Rin, who is a young child at the beginning of, well, like a preteen, at the beginning of, no, teenager? She's younger at the beginning of the story, and she is kind of like where she lives. She's like a war orphan. She's not treated very nicely, and she wants to get into this prestigious like war school to avoid having to marry somebody that she would be forced to marry. An arranged marriage. That's what I was looking for. She ends up getting in, and while she's there, she faces a lot of discrimination because she's she's darker, she's from the South, and that's if I'm remembering it correctly, because like I said, I didn't really like this book, so I shove it right out of my mind, you know what I mean? But it goes from her experiencing this life at home where she's trying to get away, to being at this school and being bullied and hated and experiencing harassment, to being thrown into full-blown war. And this book takes place over years, so part of that problem, so that brought on the problem for me that I didn't get to connect to the characters as well as I wanted to. It just, the timeline flew by so quickly that I wasn't able to connect. But I'm a little disappointed because the first half of the book is kind of what the description says it is, but the second half is nothing at all like is what's said in the description. It just, I don't know. I thought that she was kind of stupid, to be perfectly honest with you. Rin was a dumbass. I don't think that she made decisions on her own. She kind of just went with the flow. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is when a main character is just like, oh sure, okay, let's go right with that, I guess. It bothers me a lot. I like my main characters to really take action and make a choice and do what they say to what they're going to do, or at least try to. Alright, you guys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you later.